The Mystery of Black Hollow Lane. Chapter 19, last chapter of the week. When Emmy came back to the humanities wing the next night, Barlow had a sponge and soapy bucket ready for her. The walls are looking pretty scuffy in this corridor. He pointed to the end of the hallway. That one will be fine. Nobody ever goes down there. Just get the other three and that'll be enough. He looked at his watch. I have to meet a student in the library, but if you're done before I get back, just leave the bucket here and I'll get back to it later. He disappeared down the corridor and Emmy started scrubbing. It didn't take long to do the 3 walls that Barlow had asked for. The ceilings were so low in this hallway that the walls weren't that big. She looked at her watch. She might as well do the wall at the end, even if she didn't have to. Barlow had been her favorite teacher this year and she wanted to go the extra mile for him. The end of the wall was really dirty, which didn't make any sense. The closest classroom was 20 feet away, but this wall was covered in finger smudges. Her sponge kept getting stuck on the same stubborn spot. There were all these grooves and little pieces that stuck out, which made it impossible to clean. She sighed. She'd come back to that one later. But there was another stubborn spot a little higher. This one felt more like a shape, like something had been stamped onto the stone. She squinted at the wall and just about dropped her sponge. It was the order's symbol. It was so worn down she could barely see it, but the skull was definitely there. She ran her fingers over it and pushed. Nothing happened. Water dripped from her sponge and puddled on the floor. The symbol kept popping up in the strangest places. It couldn't be an accident that it was on this wall and not on the next. There had to be a reason. What am I missing? She ran her fingers over the symbol, then down along the wall. There were those grooves, the ones she couldn't get clean. She frowned. They didn't feel like they'd been worn in over time. They felt intentionally hammered out. And they were right underneath the skull. They felt like an outline, as if something would fit inside them. There were smooth circles that jutted out, like they were waiting for something to complete them. It was as if something was missing. Emmy whispered. Her heart started to race. Could this be the missing piece she'd been looking for? She threw the sponge into the bucket and ran to Audrey House, flying up the stairs without so much as a glance at anyone in the room. She burst into her room and dove under her bed. Where was it? Finally, her fingers brushed the box. She grabbed it, stuffed it into her school bag, and sprinted across the grounds until she reached the humanities wing. Okay, slow down. Make sure no one's following you. She glanced behind her and deliberately took a wrong turn. No one came after her. Quietly and carefully, she made her way back to the wall. With one last look down the empty hallway, she pulled out the shoebox and gently lifted the lid. 12 medallions, all different shapes, all with grooves and curves that seemed deliberately hammered into place, just like the spot on the wall. Emmy tapped the edge of the box. The spot on the wall had 3 points that stuck out like nails. That meant she needed a medallion with 3 holes. The first one she saw only had 2. The next one didn't have any. The third one had 3 holes, but was way too big. She picked up the 4th one and rubbed its shiny surface. It looked worn around the edges, like it had been used more than the others. It had 3 small holes. This one might work. She placed the holes onto the points. Oh, they fit. Then she pushed on the medallion and heard a distinct click. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. Something else must be about to happen. But nothing did. No secret doorway, no hidden passage. Everything was just as it was before. Emmy's shoulders slumped. She hadn't imagined that click. It sounded like an old-fashioned lock clanking into place. Then she heard another noise, but it wasn't from the wall. It was from a nearby corridor. Footsteps. She pulled the medallion off the wall and dropped it back into the box. She had just shoved the box into her bag when Master Barlow rounded the corner. Still here, are we? I just finished. Emmy threw her bag over her shoulder. If only she had a few more minutes. Excellent. Barlow picked up the soapy bucket and looked at where Emmy was standing. Were you washing the far wall? Emmy nodded. Barlow frowned. I thought I said that wasn't necessary. It seemed pretty dirty, so I figured I may as well wash that one too. She thought Barlow would be glad that she took some initiative, but he didn't look too happy. Sorry, I didn't realize it would be a problem. Barlow smiled, but his face still seemed tight. Of course, it's no problem. You'd better get back to your house before Madame Boyd accuses me of indentured servitude. Emmy thanked him and hurried back to Audrey House, hugging her bag to her chest. "And you're sure you heard it click?" Jack asked. Emmy nodded and pulled her jacket tight around her shoulders. She had dragged Jack and Lola to the mudflats again. There was no way she would risk being overheard tonight. Lola whistled. Unbelievable. "So, did you open it?" "Open what?" Emmy asked. "The door," Lola said. "There was no door," Emmy said. "Nothing happened after I heard the click." "But the click, it sounded like a lock clanking into place, right?" Lola asked. "Yeah, but so it must have been a door. You must have unlocked it." "But how do I open it?" Emmy asked. "The same way you open any door, by turning the knob." Emmy stared at Lola. "But there was no knobs. The only thing on the wall was the medallion." "Exactly." Emmy's face broke into a smile. "You think it's the key and the doorknob?" "There's only one way to find out." Lola's eyes twinkled. She and Emmy raced up the bank and had almost reached the edge of the forest when they realized Jack wasn't with them. He was standing in the muddy valley, hands stuffed into his pockets. "You don't have to come with us," Emmy said. Jack kicked a muddy stone in and squelched into a nearby puddle. "No, I'll come, if that's what you decide you want to do." "What's there to decide?" Lola asked. "There's a door. We've got to go through it. Maybe, if it's worth it. I just don't know if it is." Emmy walked back down the bank. "I know it's risky, but finding out about my dad is worth it." "But why would there be any information about your dad on the other side of that door?" He looked at Emmy with a pleading expression, like he was desperate to get through to her. "Your dad disappeared 10 years ago, and he probably hasn't had anything to do with the order since then. What do you think you'll find?" "I don't know, maybe some kind of proof they killed him." "But why would they keep any kind of evidence that they're murderers?" Jack asked. "And let's say, by some miracle, you stumbled on this proof you're looking for. What then?" "What would that mean?" Emmy shuffled her feet. "I just want answers. I want to know what happened to him." "I want that for you too, but unless there's some reason you think you'll find behind that door, I don't know if it's worth the risk of them catching you." Emmy twisted her toe into the sand. As much as she hated to admit it, Jack might have a point. "All I'm asking is that you think about it. Waiting a few extra days won't make a difference. If you're going to go head to head against the order, you better be sure." Emmy did think about it for more than a few days. The end of term was getting closer, and she still hadn't decided she would look behind the wall in the humanities wing. She didn't know what was back there, and if she stumbled on some order members, she wouldn't stand much of a chance. It also wasn't just her neck she'd be risking. Jack and Lola insisted on coming with her, and she was really honest with herself. She wouldn't know if she'd have the guts to do it without them. She had less and less time to think about it now that exams were starting. The common room had been turned into a study zone, and everyone was feeling the pressure. "What kind of things were on your school year Latin exam?" Emmy asked 2 days before her first exam. "Not much," Lola said. "Verbs, vocab, that sort of thing. Not worrying about your exam. Are you, Emmeline?" said a deep voice behind them. Emmy did a double take. Even though Master Larrabee was the head of Edmund House, he rarely came into their common room. I was just coming to see how you were getting along with your studies." Lola raised her eyebrow at Emmy. Master Larrabee didn't usually put much effort into helping his students. "I'm doing fine, I think," Emmy said. "Splendid. Just make sure you review the Tuscany disputations." Emmy stared at him. "What? Tusculan disputations? We did go over them, didn't we?" Emmy's mouth went dry. No, sir, I didn't think we did." "Oh, I'm sure we did. You must have just forgotten. Not to worry, I have a worksheet about them somewhere. How about you come to my office tomorrow at 3:30? I'll give it to you then." Emmy nodded and Larrabee swept from the room. What are the Tusculan disputations?" Emmy asked. "Beats me," Lola said. "You haven't learned it yet either?" "No," Jack said. Lola looked around the room. "Hey, Dylan," a 6th-year girl from their soccer team turned around. "What are Tusculan disputations?" "Some books written by Sergio around 2,000 years ago," Dylan said. We read some of them last year. Or is it this year?" "Just now in 6th year," Emmy asked. Dylan nodded and Emmy groaned. "Then why would I have to know about them for my 2nd-year exam?" "He's probably just mixed up the exams," Lola said. "You know what he's like." "Yeah, but what if he mixed it up when he was making the exam?" Oh, relax, Lola said. You just read the worksheet and be done with it. Next day, Emmy went to Larrabee's office at 3:30 on the dot. She raised her hand to knock, then stopped. Larrabee wasn't talking. Larrabee was talking to somebody. I know, Larrabee was saying, but don't you think that? There was silence. Yes, I agree. There was silence again. It sounded like Larrabee was on the phone. Things haven't gone to plan with the Allen girl. Emmy froze, her hand poised over the door, like a statue. I haven't been able to get a single thing out of her, Larrabee continued, and she's far too inquisitive for her own good. There was another pause. Thankfully she hasn't, and I don't see how she could. Heaven help us if she did. Emmy moved closer to the door. I haven't what? We'll keep an eye out. If she ever found her way into the lane. No, I don't see how she could. She doesn't have a medallion. There's no way she could get in. Emmy sucked in her breath. So using a medallion would get her into a black hollow lane. Thank goodness for that. We'd finish if she'd ever find out all the information we have down there, Thomas. Emmy felt like her chest was going to explode. Thomas? They had information about her dad? And she knew how to get it? Yes, she's on her way here now, so I'd best be off. She's annoyingly prompt. Emmy put her hand over her mouth and closed her eyes. She had to get that worksheet, otherwise he'd be suspicious. She took a few slow breaths, then knocked. Come in, Larrabee called. Emmy opened the door, and Larrabee flashed her a toothy grin. Oh, Emmeline, I'm glad you came. It'll give us a chance to chat. Oh, sorry, but I can't. Emmy twisted her fingers behind her back. I'm meeting a study group. Oh, what a pity. I hoped to spend a bit more time with you before the end of the year. I'm already late, so I should really just get my worksheet and go. Larrabee studied her face, probably to figure out if she'd overheard him. Emmy smiled and tried to look as relaxed as possible. Larrabee smiled back and nodded. Of course, I won't keep you then. He handed her a worksheet. Emmy thanked him and tried to keep her excitement in check as she walked out of the door. As soon as the office was out of sight, she raced back to Audrey House, her brain working with every step. The lane, a medallion, Thomas, Dad. She slowed down when she got to the edge of the forest and tried to catch her breath. If Brian saw her agitated after meeting with Larrabee, he might get suspicious. Emmy didn't pull Jack and Lola aside until after dinner. She couldn't risk doing anything suspicious, not today. When she finally told them, Lola's eyes grew wider and wider and Jack's frown grew deeper and deeper. So, what are you going to do? He asked. I'm going down there, Emmy said, and don't bother trying to talk me out of it. She was ready for a fight with Jack, but he just stood his head. I was just wondering whether we should stick together there or split up so we can find it faster. Together? Emmy said. No way. You guys shouldn't come down there. It's not safe. All the more reason we should come, Jack said. It'll be faster and safer if there are more of us. No, I can't let you. Don't be stupid, Lola said. We're not missing this. Let's face it, Jack said. You need us. Oh, next week, we're really going to find out everything because next week we're finishing the book. We only have 5 more chapters. Stay tuned.